coordinator for Unity Canada. So most of us, especially if we have been on the LUT path or the ministerial path, know Wendy very well because we have attended many of her classes. And she also has mentored a lot of LUTs that we now have in Canada who are also taking on some of the load and creating classes and doing classes. So watch out next year. They started this year, in fact, in this last quarter, to really spread out and to offer different classes that are not just for credit, but that are for you, for your own spiritual growth and enrichment. Wendy, is a long-time friend. Oh, thank you. Where is it? Thank you. Wendy is also a longtime friend of Unity Kitchener. She was with us when we first started trying to Zoom in the building when we were in lockdown from COVID. And so we have had many interesting journeys together ourselves. So we welcome you, Wendy, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you, everyone. Notes here. So I was thinking about it, and yes, my path with Kitchener goes way back to at least when Rev Sharon came, if not before. And I know I've spoken there many times before Rev Sharon came, and I've been blessed to be a part of it. And I have also spoken at Ottawa. And I'm trying to think what year it was. I just remember it was winter and the snowbanks were higher than the cars. And we were meeting somewhere on a side street, and the person who had graciously driven me and was putting me up for the night couldn't find their car because of the snow. So I'm very grateful to be here today. Okay, there we go. So it's Advent 3. I lost track of time because I didn't speak last Sunday. I took a Sunday off and Advent just went right by. So one of the first questions I want to ask people is, how do you express love? I've shared with many people that growing up in my church of origin, and if you haven't heard me before, my church of origin is a private matter because I received so many blessings that the not so nice parts are not worth drudging up someone else's name. But one of the things I remember was we had Christian comic books. Did anybody else have Christian comic books? Do you know what I'm talking about? You don't know? That's okay. So we had like Archie and Jughead comics, but they were Christian based. And we had ones that demonstrated different celebrities who were expressing the love of Jesus in their way. Yes, it was a very Jesus-oriented congregation. So we had one about Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place. We had another about, I've forgotten who the author was, but it was about the whole thing that the earth was we were on the cusp of the earth, kind of blowing up, and all of these things that gave us nightmares, and why they gave the comic books to us, I don't know. And Dennis the Menace did the most incredible interpretation of the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He's there in his cowboy costume, and you can tell that the man walking beside him is also a cowboy because you can see the end of his chaps and you can just see the tips of his guns, and they're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And the reason I mentioned that was because the one that really stuck with me and just came back to me when I saw this picture was Jughead talking about love. And the person that was describing it was like, well, Jughead says, I love hamburgers. But when he finishes eating it, he throws the wrapper away as though it was of no use to him whatsoever. And that kind of got me thinking about how do we express love? Do we understand what we mean by love? Those of you, again, who have had classes with me will know that many of the classes, the first handout I give you is all about historical context. And I think when we talk about love, that becomes an important idea. I love this picture. I am designed to see light and love. So can we accept that statement as a given? Can we accept that this is our innate nature to see light and love rather than to look for conflict, to look for that which is not perfect? Can we agree to look in those ways? Oh, okay, so the contextual historian here once did a Sunday talk where I actually sat down with some Bible dictionaries. And I counted up how many different Greek and Hebrew words there were that got translated into English simply as love. There was over 100 of them.
You went through all those.
I did. I had software, so I wasn't like reading it through, but it was amazing to me, and it helped me understand, because there were a lot of times growing up in my church of origin that things just weren't lining up. Now, understand, I was a very intuitive child, and I had a spiritual understanding even as young as the age of 4. That was when I announced that I was going to church and who was going to take me. Yeah, what can I say? This is where I ended up. But let me just give you some examples, and I'm not going to tell you which language it's from, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I'm not going to embarrass myself. But there were things like love of God. There's a specific word for love of master for a slave and a different word for love of slave for a master. There was a word for love of husband for a wife and a different word for love of wife for a husband. Can you hear, though, in English, we just say love. It's difficult. Sisterly love, brotherly love, love for a physical item, love of music, all of these things. So we've been using or misusing the word for a long time. And there are a few places where more recent scholarship has suggested, there are times when they had put in the word charity instead of love because, well, we don't want to use that word. It's kind of has too much baggage on it, where they've said, no, the actual word means this. And I have a wonderful study Bible that has like half the pages just footnotes about what the original language was. And that to me was really important, being concise in our languaging, being as clear as we can be, because it's so much easier to see the light and the love if our eyes are clear, not only our outer eyes, but our inner eyes. And I now have a scratch on my lens, and it's driving me crazy because all of a sudden my sight is affected by that. And metaphysically, I got thinking about, okay, what does this mean to me? And it means right now my sight is not fully clear because I've got these scratches on the lens. So how do I take that and go within and say, all right, what ideas, what past beliefs, what past thinking, what thing that I heard on the radio, or I don't watch TV anymore. I gave up my cable, so I just watch on the computer. So what did I see in a streaming podcast that has got an idea about what is real, what is truthful? And as always, I usually go to our co-founders for an idea. And this one of Myrtle's, the first time I read it, I went, whoa, Myrtle girl, wow. When the harshness of others seems to crush you, you can send forth love, the power that not only blesses you, but goes forth to redeem the adverse conditions in the outer. I'm just going to pause there. Anyone who was raised in a literal interpreting church will know that there's a lot around an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, this for that. This is the punishment for that sin or that action. But what we look at when we pull the camera back farther and we look at a variety of spiritual teachers, past, like far past, more recent past, current. And those that are on the verge of getting their names really known, you find that they will say that love is the better answer and that that is the best response. And Myrtle goes on to say, when petals of the fragrant rose are crushed by cruel hands, they send forth their sweetness even more than before. And ironically, the best way, if you're going to make rose oil, is you have to crush those petals. You have to break down those bonds to allow the essentials to come out. And I love Myrtle's understanding because, most people would say, I remember going to get some roses to put on a tombstone. And I picked some that were probably seconds. And I didn't care because I knew that it was just going to decay in the grave. And she said to me, oh, no, no, no. I have to give you the best. I said, no, seriously, I'll take these. And she's like, no, I'll get in trouble with my boss. And I felt kind of guilty taking these beautiful, immaculate roses that were just going to go. And it was fall. So you knew they were going to, fall apart rather quickly. But then I thought, but the scent that they will give out, that's worth it. So if we take this again metaphysically, it helps me remember that sometimes, how do you make an omelet? You have to crack a few eggs, right? You have to bust them open. So too, sometimes we need to kind of shift our thinking about this. And I've really tried to learn in the last few years how to stop and step back and breathe and not lash out immediately, not have that knee-jerk reaction to lash out in anger or intolerance. So perhaps sometimes when that happens, we're being blessed with the true vision of someone's real self, not the masks that they wear. They may say that they love you, and you may intuitively say, and, or but, and yet that significance, I look at it again, I go back to Myrtle and say, that's the crushed rose that's allowing me to see that part of you. One of the most famous passages about love is from 1 Corinthians 13. And I debated. I was like, oh, I don't know. Do I really want to read a Bible verse or 2 or 3 or 4? And then I was watching Alistair Sims in Scrooge because I have to watch that every year. And this is in Dickens. This is important enough that it is transcended and come out of the scriptures into our common phrasing. And I get amazed when I go to a service of remembrance for someone who has not been an active spiritual person in the outward sense. They may have done it on the inward sense, but I know even at my great uncle's, he was an avowed atheist. This was read because whoever planned the service said that it was important enough. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three. And the greatest of these is love. I would summarize that whole passage like this. Divine love blesses all I think, say, and do. We can consciously choose to live to the best of our ability from a place of love. I will say, for myself, I will not cast aspersions on anyone in the room, on Zoom, watching later. Some people, particularly politicians, are more difficult to love than others. I freely admit that. And it calls me to try again. So what I'd like to do is consciously set an intention. I choose to live with a peaceful heart, not one that gets stretched in all directions, but rather focuses on love and just allows it to pour out and allows the love to go where it needs to go. Now, having quoted Myrtle, you know I have to quote Charles. Love is the great mystery of life. The spiritually wise see love as the force that enfolds with mathematical precision the galaxies in space as well as the tiniest atom. Science names it gravity. And this excerpt's tied to this next one, which is the first of the two that I heard. Gravity is mortal man's name for love. By the invisible arms of love, we are held tight to the earth's prolific bosom, and there we find the sweetest home in all the universe. In my church of origin, we used to have Sunday school flyers when we weren't reading the comic books. And I remember one of the very few I kept a long time after I had left was one about creation versus evolution. Evolution said how, but not why. And creation said why, but not how. Now, in theory, the publishers of that booklet believe that the two could peacefully coexist. In my personal congregation, no, it couldn't, because don't you know, the Bible says that there was day and there was night, and that was it. And it was 24 hours, and yeah. So how can we take Charles's thought about gravity? Remember, somebody said to me, oh, but that word bosom, I have trouble with that bosom. Okay, let's go back to context here. Context here is at the time of Charles writing this, so late 19th, early 20th century, we were still in a space where most babies were breastfed, either by their birth mother or by a wet nurse, a woman who had had a child and was still able to produce milk. They didn't have all these fancy things and tubes and squishy bottles and stuff. The idea, though, not of being it something sexual, but rather the idea of being comforted, of being nourished, of being comforted, and being that space of this is where I belong. This is my place. And so in the light of those two excerpts from Charles, we can affirm for ourselves that divine love eagerly welcomes me home. It's not a must or a have to. It's an eagerness to be loved. I kind of laugh because I had a girlfriend, I was talking with her, and it's been 6 years since my husband passed. And she said, so you're not dating yet? I said, no, don't really have any intention to, because for me, love is much more expansive than just that husband-wife relationship we had. If somebody walks into my life that I can't ignore, then hey, some of you will be the first to know. Some of you will be the ones that take me aside and say, girl, Really, you're being willfully blind here, and would you open your eyes for God's sake? I could see you doing that. But the idea that we don't have to be in a relationship with someone, we don't have to only have that physical love, that we can have that inner spiritual love, knowing that at the core, we can say gravity is just love in a different form or a different description. And something that many spiritual teachers, past, present, and probably future, know that as you increase your love, the blessings appear. And I'll just invite you to take this one into your heart. I open my heart to love, and I am blessed with peace, joy, and harmony. I could use a little bit more peace, joy, and harmony, especially the peace. A little bit more harmony. That idea that we don't have to narrow what love is. We don't have to put attachments to it. We don't have to put strings on it. We don't have to put conditions on it. We can put it as open as we are able. And finally, another one from Myrtle. When we put aside all striving for affection and give our attention to the expressing of love towards everybody and everything, then love comes to us without seeking. Late Episcopalian bishop and author John Shelby Spong used to encourage his audience to love wastefully. And I remember being a little confused by that phrase until he explained to pour your gift of love out, not worrying about where it was going, whether or not the people that were on the receiving end were worthy of it, but just to acknowledge that you have so much love within you that you don't have to eke it out in small doses. I'm noticing, had an experience that I can only say is love in expression. I had a thought of what I was going to get someone for Christmas. And I can't tell you anymore because they might watch this before Christmas and I don't want to spoil the surprise. And the item was, you just looked at it. You ever done that? You look at something and you go, oh my goodness, that is perfect. Well, what wasn't perfect for me was the price and the fact that the store was a 2-hour drive away. And I said, that's fine. I appreciate my stewardship. I appreciate the blessings I have. I know how far to stretch and when to say no. That's beyond my stretch point. And I was starting to sort of say, okay, well, I will find a different way to express this love. And then I discovered they were opening a pop-up shop the weekend after US Thanksgiving, 45 minutes away from me. Whole pop-up shop, 25% off. Yes, they are getting the gift that I originally wanted. But to me, the love that I was looking and the fact that I was willing to say this or something better made it happen. So now I'm going to invite you to participate in an open eye meditation. I really have been pondering what Spong's loving wastefully could mean going forward. So let's start by getting comfortable. If you need to wiggle or, stand up or whatever. Let's start by getting physically comfortable and aware of our true identity in the spiritual experience. And let us claim this affirmation together, please. I am a center of divine love, attracting and radiating blessings. And let's just take a few breaths in the silence, allowing these words to settle in our minds and hearts. And having established who we are, let's take this one in And it might feel like a stretch, especially this time of year. And I hesitated, but the thought came to me, the word is express. It's not demanding. If all you have is 40% to give, but you give all of that 40%, you're giving 100%. So let's take this aloud together. I express divine love and understanding to all. And again, let's pause for a few moments to take it within. And as we learn to express love, we can add this statement: when we are ready to begin the journey towards reconciliation. Reconciliation within ourselves first, and outwardly in whatever way is healthy and safe for ourselves second. It's not about the other person, the other situation. This is about finding the peace within ourselves. And let's repeat this together. Let love be the starting place towards reconciliation. And let love be the starting place towards reconciliation. And let's again pause, taking these words and ideas in. And finally, let's affirm this together. I envision all people building a word of peace on a foundation of love. And let us pause and bless the world. Seeing the love pouring from us, through us and as us, surrounding this planet. We affirm these statements for ourselves and for everyone in the oneness. And so it is, and so it shall be, and so I let it be. Amen.